Okay.
Okay, so I guess we're recording.
Yeah.
I'll kick us off. So the things I noticed that maybe happened since the last meeting, lots of PRs around build and test and stuff. I didn't really enumerate them, but the one of the big ones I saw go by was fixes around the Git submodule issue, which had like a huge chunk of work from Teddy, Zach, me. So it's pretty awesome. Big thanks to Teddy on that one. There's been a lot of progress on fuzzing work, which is pretty cool, which is coming from Tom Ritter, I think. So that's pretty cool too. We got lots of submissions around additional tests, which is pretty cool. I think a lot of those came in from Hacktoberfest, so that's great. More tests, yay. And I think the extensions PR merged, so another huge milestone. Thanks. I think that was mostly Stefana, so thanks on that. Any other thing?
Akshay was, keyword on it. I reviewed it, but yeah.
Anything else people want to add into this chunk?
I think a lot of tests have been fixed. Did you already say that?
I said more tests enabled, but yeah.
Yeah, specifically the Python ones.
Oh yeah, that's a great call out. Has
the 2 to 3 updates, have they merged? I think they're still in progress.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of work going into that. So my question about has that been merged isn't to dismiss all of the difficulty there. But if it had been, I would have been shocked because I know there's still a lot of work to do.
And maybe it won't all be done, but it's worth merging what we have finished.
So I can say for the Python tests one that what's happening there is that all the tests, well, the Python part and also some of the Osquery part is finished. Though those tests sometimes, in some cases, find issues on Osquery itself, so the tests do not pass. So, for instance, I have a test Osquery I test, which Python script, the Python script, which on Windows is not able to read a JSON file for some reason, also because that happens only on the CI, but not on my local machine. I still need to understand if it's because that run has happened with the old rapid JSON or something like that. But yeah, the issue there is that the CI is a bit slow building Windows, so it's it's a bit difficult understanding. So yeah, in general, they should all pass. I still need to update the documentation because we are requiring new packages to be installed. And yeah, that's it basically.
Is there a way we can? Yeah. No. Is there a way we can tier the tests so that we don't have 13 builds going on at the same time? Maybe have a few, and then the next tier would be having the rest.
You mean to avoid having tests fail, basically, so that we can? Yeah, basically, I think we can decide to disable some of the tests on the platform that still have issues. Because
are we talking about the same thing? So when we do a merge right now, we kick off six-ish builds, right? We 3 platforms and CMake and Buck. And I think maybe Alex was asking if we should do those like sequentially versus in parallel.
Yeah, maybe a few initial and then sequential after that. We even have debug and release, so it's more like 8 or 9.
Yeah, it doesn't change much, unfortunately. I mean, because actually the CI gives you up to 10 jobs, and currently we are below 10 jobs. So all those jobs get run in parallel. And also, it's not only one machine dealing with those jobs. They are actually, they have each one has its own VM. So running them sequentially wouldn't change much than running them in parallel. They would still take the same amount of time total. So yeah.
What's the question we're discussing? Is it how to get that PR, which is 5836 merged efficiently, or is it just overall reducing the time it takes to run the tests?
So I interjected and threw that in there, thinking, we must, maybe the reason some of these builds are slow is because we kick off so many and we're using some pool of resources. So
Got
I
it.
derailed the conversation there.
No problem.
So yeah, no, the answer for the PR is, again, yeah, we can at last minute, if I'm not able to fix those, we can disable some of them on some platform. I know at least that if one wants to do some checks locally, it can. They do run and work, and also, I think my intention for that PR was mainly restoring those tests, and if they found something, probably work on that later. So yeah, I did some of those fixes, but yeah, we are.
I guess it's a good
Yeah,
question.
maybe,
Maybe an implicit thing that got asked is, could we start breaking this PR up?
I don't.
I guess a lot of
think
it's
it
file
has-
renames. I'm just looking at the PR. I'm like, it looks like a pretty big PR, but
Yeah, no. On one side, I just moved. Moved some files so they were better separated. But the majority is Python script changes, and that's again was the intention. So as I said, the Python script are ready. I just need to update the doc. So I think that can be merged if we accept the fact that some of those tests will fail, or, well, we will disable some of those so they do not fail.
I think objectively, we're in a better place now than we were in the previous release. So it seems like the 4.1.0 release and the 4 remaining milestones that are open, which are the CPAC package inconsistencies, which we have a handle on, the restoring the TLS test, which is part of this giant PR, this Herculean effort, and then create or restore a smoke test, which is on the build artifacts. We can move that to 4.2 because we don't have build artifacts being produced by CI just yet. And then upgrade the Python tools to Python 3 seems like a quality of life issue. So we can also move that or call it complete. And so I think we'll be on track to release for Friday, whether we have this PR merged or not, because Stefano, if I'm interpreting you correctly, like we've identified some of the larger issues and you've driven a fix for them, and those have largely landed already.
Yeah, I think that we can actually merge that PR also for Friday, with the caveat that we will disable some of the tests because probably they will still fail. So
sure.
So you're advocating that we move several of these out of the 4.1 milestone to a 4.2 milestone?
Only one of them, actually, the create or restore some kind of smoke test for build artifacts.
I think the Python will also get us like half of that, if not all of it. So I'm fine with moving that. Yeah.
I think that issue was actually related to Python tests, because we have one Python test specifically, which is test release, that does some checks to the binaries, And it does that before packaging or anything. So, and it's restored and running.
The refactor and restore TLS tests will be fixed by the Python test. Is that correct?
Actually, no. That's I wanted to do that in a separate PR. Though,
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we have to see.
And what's the state of the CPAC packaging inconsistencies?
I did want to talk about that. If we're done talking about the test, we can move on to that. I think it's a couple of follow-up questions there.
I'm just sort of trying to bounce around and keep agenda notes here. Oh, I see you put that down under more agenda. Okay, I'm going to pull that up to the 4.10 release. Okay. We can talk about that, or because we're sort of on the topic of the 4.10 release, because it seems like Python blurred into it a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's important for us is to try an end-to-end run of building packages through CPAC and not rely on the scripts that we were using before. And so there are 2 remaining pull requests for that. That one just needs a review, which is adding the DBM copyright file to the right location. That's 5951, should be a pretty simple review unless I've done something wrong. And then one that's more complicated is 5936. And Stefano and I were working on that. It enables debug builds for RPMs, which is very important because when we do create the RPM, we want to have the debug in case we need to debug any crashes. And so those have to be built together, otherwise it's not going to work. And so this part of this relies on editing the output binary. And so we need enough space. I'll let you read the PR, but anyway, there's some interaction between the CI and this PR that we need to coalesce. And we've tried a couple times. I think I'm doing something wrong. I could probably use some help.
Yeah, I forgot to write on it. I think there's simply the source directory in one case that is not correctly specified, meaning that it misses the last component. Yeah, but I will write that on that PR because I recall I saw it, but I don't know. I don't recall where. So
okay.
It should be easy. Anyway.
Okay, I guess we'll try and look at those.
Quick question on that note. So like the migration to everything CPAC related, has Windows been when this should be done through CPAC?
You are breaking up. Can you please repeat it?
I think Nick asked if we've migrated Windows MSI packaging into CPAC.
Yeah, is that better? Can you guys hear me better?
Yep.
Yeah, that was my question.
Well, we had MSI packaging with CPAC from the start. I don't know if we are using it. I think so.
Well, I can take it as an action item to investigate getting the chocolatey pipeline hooked up with that. I know there's quite a few people who still use the chocolatey packages, and I'm the one who ships those, but I'm happy to roll that into CPAC to get that more automated. I just wasn't sure of the state of it. That's why I was asking.
Hey, Nick, what might be helpful is to use the previous script to build the MSI and then use CPAC and then just kind of manually go through it and see if there are any inconsistencies.
Sounds good.
If all of this is, so one thing that can help with that is you can use Wix's decompiler and you can decompile MSI.
Oh, and you can, will that give you back the XML that was used to generate it? All right, sweet. I can take a look at that. Because yeah, the 402 stuff that we published that was signed, I just used the same old build scripts that I've used in the past. But I think that the differences between that and CPAC have got to be minimal.
Yeah, I don't think I've gone through and compared these, but Wix ships dark.exe, and you can just run dark.exe on an MSI and it'll spit out a WXM, but whatever their extension is.
Yeah, Wix objects, whatever. Yeah, thanks, man.
No, the XML, not the object format.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, the step before that.
Oh, so much Wix. So one of our early agenda items that we skipped briefly was PRs. So if people want to bring up any PRs, someone noted that there are a handful of new tables from user Puffy Sid that maybe they wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I added that because I saw that Puffy Sid was doing a lot of work with some, let's say, medium-sized scope Windows tables. And I was getting a little out of my comfort zone for reviewing Windows code. I think there's a combination of like reviewing the code from a Windows APIs perspective, and then also reviewing the code from a C++, modern C++ best practices perspective. So it'll take a little bit of work. This isn't like a 20-minute review. It's a little longer than that. But I'm just here to advocate for someone to help Puffy Sid.
What was your concern specifically with the Windows API that you may not be able to review?
I don't remember.
I can try and take another look at those. I don't know the Windows APIs, but I remember there being some kind of weird stuff on the C level.
Okay, so, yeah, I'm looking at it again, and so there's some time conversion that I see often with Windows time constant.
One of these we already have standardized utility for, I think, in particular. Like he's doing this last run. I'll take, sorry, I didn't say anything because I was looking through it. I'll take a look at it as well when I get a chance. I have time tonight in the next couple of nights, so I'll try and make it a priority.
Okay, I think, Nick, you just merged the Windows time conversion, right? That was like in the last...
Not yet. It's coming soon. The date time to Unix time. There's something's breaking. It's actually one of the notes that I wanted to ask questions about, but I'll bring that up later. But I'm more than happy to do Windows reviews. I really suck at life and at noticing things sometimes. So please feel free to ping me and like ask me to look at stuff. I watch my email really closely. I just suck at staying on top of GitHub notifications. So sorry about that, y'all.
There is a lot of them. Like no apology needed. Okay.
Does anyone else want to jump in for their PR or any questions about development?
Hey, Terry, this is Nishant.
Hey, Nishant.
Hey, so I asked a question on Slack about that events forwarding. So I could not get your actually reply. Means sorry, I could not understand your reply. So that forwarding, event forwarding, that's the oldest PR, opened oldest PR, which I opened 2 years back. So you said that, yeah, it's good to have. And you also mentioned that it has the potential to lose the events. So I did not get that point, one thing. And if you want to have that PR implemented as it is, or as I understand that Facebook guys are also implementing that. I think they were changing the code comprehensively. So I don't know the state of that. Are they going to contribute event forwarding framework?
Sure. I think what you're referencing is the EV2 framework, which I talked to Philippe. It's in the exact same state that you can observe on GitHub. It sort of got a lot of effort and then it was paused for no reason, like that there wasn't like a technical blocker that hit. It just could use some more attention. The reason you probably couldn't understand what I was referencing is because I'm not the best person. I was kind of trying to interpret what others have mentioned before about going from the events frameworks directly to the logger and bypassing the intermediate storage. I think Alex might be a good person to talk to about this.
Well, the problem with that is you still have to cache the events somewhere. So I don't think it buys us anything. So I have an upcoming PR for event storage, and I have a cache logger PR that I'm working on to improve some of these things. And we've been using them for months.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks. So regarding this, it has to cache, yes. So in case of getting the events via normal queries, so events have to go to the backend, that's the staging area, and then it is queried again, and it is again pushed to the RocksDB. These are the two hops. So with the direct forwarding, we are forwarding those events to the TLS loggers RocksDB area, and then TLS logger after every 4-second default interval or whatever interval you have set. It picks up 1024 entries at max and then forwards that to the cloud or TLS server. So that was the optimization, because we have got rid of many SQL queries, because as you know that, as you mentioned that scheduler is already overworking. And because we got rid of these event queries, yeah, so it is working better, the scheduler. And on top of that, in the PR which you have opened, caching, you have improved a lot. I have able to modify the code via fast logger, where I'm using the RocksDB and some optimization. So that way I have got rid of most of the problems of RocksDB, because RocksDB is ferocious entity and we were not using, for example, we were not doing the batch write and batch delete. I'm able to do that. And because of these forwarding of events, so many threads are now converging to common area, and then it also increases the chance of contention, but I am also able to take care of that issue. So mostly I'm able to batch write and batch delete into the RocksDB, and it is working fine for me. So from that perspective, also forwarding of events, actually the way to scale the OS query. That's what I perceive. Anyway, even if we don't use RocksDB or not, we have to forward the events, mean fast generated events. We don't have to use that SQL query area, scheduling the queries. That's my point of view. Thank you.
So how do you filter down the set of Windows events, for example, before you forward them?
I did not get your question. Can you repeat that again, please?
So if you're forwarding Windows events and you're not going through a cache table to run queries on them to filter them down, how do you filter them? Right, so you're just taking every
query, where clause is filtering using the where clause.
I think I kind of understand what the point here is that like the where clause is applied inside of that cache table, right? So like if you're doing raw forwarding of the events out, you never really get the opportunity to apply the where clause. That was kind of how I think this framework was going to be re-architected, was that there wasn't going to be a concept of being a table where you'd select against it. It was going to be more instead like you have operating system publishers that you'll subscribe to, and this forwarding framework will just forward things out directly. Someone can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but like I think to Mike's point, he's kind of getting to the side of like you still have to do some form of batching to ship things out, and you're not really going to be able to do the filtering. Was that kind of what you were saying, Mike? Did I understand you correctly?
I'm not sure that was my comment.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was me. That was Alex.
Oh, Alex, sorry about that. I was in another screen and I was just listening, so I didn't see voices. Was that kind of what you were referring to, Alex?
Right. In order for you to filter down the events it has to be run through SQLite query. And typically that needs a backed table, either the cache or a virtual table. So I was just asking Nishant how he accomplished that.
Oh, that is not an implementation. We are just forwarding the events, so it's not applicable to every events you want. Means if you want to join that table with any other table, so you have to have that mechanism in place. So it is conditional forwarding. Means if you want that events to be forwarded as well as to be stored backend, so it has to be implemented that way. But if you want that events to be forwarded, means it contains everything, you need not to have the join or any other thing, then you want to have the events instantly at your location. So it doesn't have to be stored at the backend and then queried. So it's like this. So yes.
It sounds like something we should have a blueprint for.
Yeah, EV2 was like Teddy mentioned. There was a blueprint. The purpose of that only. Yeah, conditionally we can forward those events, and there was a provision for caching in memory as well. Let me see if I find that EV2 blueprint.
Could the filtering happen at capture time with a configuration option? I was just wondering.
I think
yes, it can also happen. We have implementation in place, and you will find it that it is deceptively simple. It can filter based upon the columns, specific columns you mention in configure file, and you want to filter for specific IPs not to be forwarded events for, or the host name or anything. So you have to mention in configuration file and forward that to the Osquery, and it will filter at in the event.cpp. We have implementation in place.
So from out here, I haven't really looked at this code and I don't understand all of the event subsystems. What it sounds like a little bit is to explore higher performance event streaming. You're talking about sort of fundamentally changing the Osquery model and getting outside of the whole SQL select, that whole universe, and instead basically using Osquery as a shim to say, subscribe to this OS API, shove events down the TLS socket. And you've basically added a layer of filtering on top of that, which seems pretty cool. But I don't know how that sort of fits it with like the rest of Osquery. So I feel like there's a much larger conversation to be had around the EV2 blueprint or some other events blueprint. And maybe one thought for this to me from a CEP background is like, what does Osquery eventing look like in a CEP framework? Can we learn anything? Like, how do all of these pieces plug together, and how does it sort of feel coherent with the Osquery model and not just kind of an ad hoc, shove this to there?
Yeah, sometime back we had this conversation that why we should forward the events directly. Why should not go via the schedule query layer? So there was some little conversation in the eBPF, after which this EV2 effort started. It's eBPF, a channel you can check.
I think it would be relatively easy to have a bypass that goes from event subscribers directly to Logger plugins. And that diff that you're referencing, Nishant, does the groundwork for that. It just only hooks it up to the TLS logger, I think. So refactoring that a little bit so that any logger could take advantage of it, and then just gate that behind a configuration option, you could start to see this kind of functionality, in steps. But I just wanted to throw that out there as like if you wanted to do this in like a milestone based approach, I do think, coming together on a blueprint and discussing what happened in EV2, this approach, the way that you've solved this, the way that others have solved this, so that we can kind of converge on like one path forward would be outstanding. Seth, I don't think like the SQL, like bypassing the SQL engine, I don't think that's a big problem. Like he's still, but it's cool to bring it up. Like you get a lot of features from Osquery from just modeling stuff around like a table and like rows. And then you also get decorators and all the other stuff that would come out of just like representing a SQL. But the like, hey, we need to get this data out as fast as possible without hitting like performance and storage.
I mean, tell you where I'm coming from on that.
Sure.
Osquery does a lot of things for a lot of people, and probably like almost everyone in this call uses it in slightly different ways. And that makes it hard for people to get traction with it. A conversation I've often had with Groob is around like, what is Osquery for? How do people use it? How do they get into it? So from that perspective, I think it's important to kind of have a coherent vision. So like, I both recognize the value in the basic underlying model and using it to stream data out. And that doesn't mean that's not great and we shouldn't just embrace that. But there's also this other idea. So there's sort of like what is the coherent story we should tell? And then we should embrace it and do it. So I like, we hammer it out in a blueprint and then just decide.
That's fair, yeah.
Doesn't mean we shouldn't do this. Just, we should have a theory for how it will work.
I think that for events, it does make sense forwarding them, as it may be interesting to join event tables with other tables. But again, it is mostly a race condition when you take an older snapshot taken from an event-based source and attempt to join it with current state in the machine. And with audit, we always have some kind of lag between the two states. So I wonder how many people are actually making use of the fact that event data is inside the table, rather than just selecting all the events and streaming them back to the logger.
The filtering, definitely.
Yeah, I would bet the filtering is key.
For a server, good luck. We'll take down your network.
I'm pretty sure we've also seen people doing some amount of joining, because I have definitely, not for Collide, but for other entities, I have debugged effectively that race condition between joining process events on anything else.
You must have had fun.
Not really, it's like, oh, I know exactly what bug you fit.
Yeah, it makes sense for filtering. But I mean, filtering can also be done in other ways. I was wondering if SQLite for events is the most correct approach here.
Yeah, I did an Antler 4 SQL filter at one point for Windows events, proof of concept. But like you're all saying, this is a big conversation. We should get in a blueprint and try and get a direction.
Cool. The other topics, I think it was sort of me nitpicking on the developer experience, which is like, we have we're not consistent on where we keep tests. And also, so I'll seed the topic. So inconsistency on where we put tests, and then the overhead of defining sort of each test.cpp file as its own linked executable, a lot of overhead in the build, with a simple way of just going into CMake and kind of refactoring that so that every .cpp file in a test directory is built together and linked into one test. And then the final thing was just, we have a lot of repeated code inside of CMake right now, where for each target that we define, we have a static set of things we link against, versus, let's say for a folder, we define the linkage requirements. And then for every file inside that folder, we just use that same set of linkage targets. The fourth thing was the inconsistency in the include paths. I understand that they all need to be exported, but setting the expectation that, like, if you're using the SDK or for extensions, you would just use include signature. You just use method signatures from /osquery/include versus any of the header files scattered throughout the repository? Sorry, it's a lot.
So I heard 3 topics go by.
Four topics.
Well, but 2 of them sounded the same to me.
Cool.
Inconsistent include paths, which, is that just a bug that should get fixed? Like, I don't know. Exported headers, which maybe also sounds like kind of just a thing we should do. And then like a little bit more of a sprawling conversation about tests, which you had 2 things, and I've got something about tests too, which maybe is a subset of yours. I don't know. So how do you want to talk about these?
I guess for all of them, the reason I grouped them together is like I'm happy to go through and make the kind of changes, but they'll require a bit of review, and also be good to have someone with a bit more experience on CMake and a bit more experience on building large projects to provide guidance to me.
So if you, I had a couple of comments on those. So starting from the long list of libraries that are currently specified, I think. So part of the reason they are explicitly specified was simply because we were mirroring back. But yeah, we can obviously diverge from it. Though there's one thing, important thing I had there, which is, so first of all, I think we will have to go through the issue 5916, because currently we are not exactly, and I'll put it in the chat maybe. Okay, because we are not correctly, in all cases, correctly specifying the list of dependencies for all the targets, which means sometimes we compile too much, sometimes not enough, and also we link maybe too much, especially in the end for the tests. And I think this is the first step, because in this way we have the correct dependency list for each target. Then I think I'm not sure if it's a good idea to aggregate all the target on their root directory, while instead maybe do that for each CMake list, because it's easy. I think that you might need to add a new target, which maybe doesn't require just one or a couple of those common options. And so you have to remove them from the common options and add all the rest to the other targets. So it's a bit difficult in maintenance, I think, also in that case. And moreover, I don't know if you wanted to accept the fact that sometimes we would link more target than we needed.
Sure. So
yeah,
common targets would be per CMake lists, not one like the root directory, but in each one of the subdirectories, you would essentially start out with a common, and then if one, let's say, source file needed something very specific, we could do that.
Yeah, with on the top of the hierarchy of each subfolder, I meant. So like one group of targets for the config library, one group of targets for Osquery core, and right. So yeah.
I have a test question. Actually, so first a point of order. You mentioned issue 5916. Which of Teddy's things is that related to?
The amount of targets and dependencies specified for each library or executable. So for instance,
so the tests, this is related to the test linkages?
No, well, it's also related to the test linkages, but it is related to any target we have in CMake. So any library or executable we build. Okay. So for instance, yeah.
So the other maybe larger question I had was about tests. So right now we have 2 sets of tests. We have like unit tests and integration tests, and ignoring Python and smoke tests, right? We have these unit tests and integration tests. And to be honest, they all feel kind of like Unity tests to me. And They all kind of look like small snippets of C code.
Yes, yes.
One thing that's kind of been a frequent frustration to me is that the unit tests kind of run nicely. Like I can run one of them and I can see like which one fails. The integration tests seem to like run as one big chunk. Is that what other people see? Like I don't get clear indications of which one's running, and I can't say like only run that one. So if you refactor this, I like this. I like the unit tests more than the integration tests.
That's a good comment. I think so. There is a way to only run one of those tests. There's some command line flags that you can tell GTest which specific test to run. So we can document that, or we can add some sort of like helper script to make that easy. But so the recommendation I'm making is to go more towards let's say, a world where there's 10 executables, and each one of them represents a category of tests.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be more of the experience that you have right now.
So this gets into like, I don't know CMake very well, or C++ testing ideology. Like the number of executables, I think one of my problems is the unit tests have this nice display of like, I'm starting test X, I ran test X, right? Or like test Y failed. And I think that's only loosely coupled with the number of binaries, because some of those are coming out of the same underlying CPP files. The integration tests seem like they just, like I have very little indication of where they are in the runtime. They like run with no, I don't know, it's just very opaque to me.
So yeah, the issue there is that there are multiple layers, so you have the actual executable layer. Then you have the test framework, GTest. GTest itself has the concept of a test and a test case. So all the single names you see when tests run, those are test cases.
Okay.
Sometimes test cases are grouped in a test, which is the first part of the name, which normally like extension test, that's the test name, dot test something, that's the test case. So, for instance, the complete name, the full name of a test might be extension test.test call through drift. Yeah, I'm inventing it. And so extension test is the test name as GTest defines it. And the second part, test call through drift, is the test case. So this is the first differentiation. Then you obviously those test cases can be grouped in different tests, and sometimes those well, it depends. Those tests sometimes could be all together in a single binary, like in the integration test, or they could actually represent each own their binary, which is the current case actually. Most of the cases for the unit test, each GTest test has its own binary, which is what Teddy, I agree, is a bit against. So there's only one caveat there. So definitely we can group them. I've seen though that we started having tests that require different permissions to be run and to be properly run, or for the test to test something. So yeah, we also have to look into that and split them a bit, because there are some tests on Linux, especially, that require root access, while currently they are not run as root, but only as a normal user.
So, but I mean, that seems achievable, because if you have one binary per CMake file, one CMake file might be called, root level tests or something. And it sounds like the thing I was saying is not about the binaries, but more about like the grouping of test cases and tests. And I think my only request in refactoring that is that it's easy and pleasant to interact with. And the unit tests are pretty good, but I find the integration tests kind of horrible. And if that's just how the tests and test cases go, that's cool.
Yeah. Those integration tests originally were split and were put kind of together with unit tests. And I think, yeah, recently with the experimental passage, they have been moved all there. Yeah, we can, I think, go back or, yeah.
I think there's certainly a good argument to just merging it all back together because it's a little weird how it is.
Cool.
So I think we just kind of talked about tests, and I think it sounds like Stefano and Teddy generally think the thing that Teddy wanted is reasonable, and maybe we need like either a blueprint might be overkill, but maybe in the beginning of a PR or something.
Yeah, I think if we try it once or twice and then get some feedback, I would know how to apply that to all the rest of the, let's say, 30 or 40 directories.
What do you want to talk about the other two or three things you brought up?
I think that I've got good answers for them. I can take over trying to find the least or the correct number of, let me start again. I can take over finding the linkage requirements for each one of the targets to make sure that we're not being overly broad. And I can also make sure Buck represents that as well. I can look for a way to make sure CMake and Buck are in lockstep around defining a single set of common targets for each subfolder so that they look relatively the same. The structure of Buck and the structure of CMake lists looks relatively the same. What I don't know is a efficient or smart way to evaluate the exact targets. What I would do is just read the code and try to guess what the linkage requirements are and then go with that and see what happens.
Can you export a graph from the current Buck project you have internally and start from there?
I can, but I think it's going to have the same bugs where it's overly forgiving about overly broad linkage.
Yeah, I think the only way is really looking at the code, because that was kind of work that had to be done when developing that code in general. I mean,
yeah.
Does this may not be the right time to ask the question, but does anyone use the Buck stuff in open?
I don't think anyone open source uses it, but having it there is a good way to do. So I started merging like back and forth.
Okay, it helps you.
The Buck. I was actually a proponent for removing the Buck from GitHub, and when I started trying to sync code back and forth, I found it very helpful. So
Yeah,
I switched my recommendation to keeping it there.
Okay, if it helps you, that's meaningful to me.
Because I already have bugs in these last couple of things with the date time to Unix time, some of the utility stuff, some of the tests. Like these are things I actually fully intend to bring internally because they'll be very helpful internally. And having Buck there is going to make my life so
No, great. I mean, that was always my goal.
between Buck and CMake, depending on how squirrely I'm feeling that day. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, because we're running a little short on time and I have to go because I have a conflict. I have a question listed down there. I think so. I'm wanting to kind of take the temperature. I'm starting to derail the discussion, but I just kind of want to ask a question really quick. The CMake builds on Windows seem heinously long these days. It's like over an hour to build the product. And I think like a lot of the compiling that I'm seeing looks related to the Amazon SDK. I have no idea what's going on or if this is expected. I'm mostly just trying to ask, like, is this normal? Are we expecting over an hour build on Windows now? Because this isn't even a clean build. This is like incremental. So if there's something I can do to help, I can jump in and investigate, but I wanted to just kind of see if anybody was already doing this.
I give you an answer on the comment below. We would like to have Ninja working fine, and we need help debugging it.
That'd be nice.
So why doesn't it help with this? Because my recollection of this conversation showed up on Slack, and there was discussion about how at some fundamental level, Windows doesn't support parallel builds. So you run into this big serialization issue, and it's trying to rebuild AWS. So like maybe a question to ask is, could we not build AWS each time? And like, how does Ninja help with this?
I brought this up at this point because I was actually curious, and Ted, maybe you know, like you guys are talking about the linkages. Like, are there subcomponents of AWS? I don't know anything about the AWS SDK, but do we have to link all of it? Are there components of it we don't need to have included on the Windows side? Like, is this?
I think we stripped down the initial part that we didn't need because we rewrote the CMake for the project.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we are building things we don't need on Windows. I think most of it has been removed. We need to check again, maybe.
Like looking at the compilation list, it's like everything. It's like all of it. It's stuff that doesn't make any sense. So
yeah. Mostly it has many dependencies in there, and
of course
the upstream project also downloads several things from other repositories under the AWS organization, which we had to import.
Okay.
The reason we would like to use Ninja is because parallel builds actually work there compared to MS Build. And of course it is slow compared to Bach because Bach doesn't use MS Build. And that is why it works better.
Right.
So if we could start by migrating everything, all the libraries back to the source ledger, and test Ninja, I think it's going to improve build time quite a lot.
Let me know what I can do to help with that, because like I'm favoring Buck a little bit more these days just because of how much faster the builds are. So like if there's things I can do to test or build or architect, please let me know.
Sorry,
go ahead. I just got to
just wanted to say, one of the problems there is that actually also on Linux, if you remove CC cache, because currently we are caching on the CI many of the objects on Linux, if you remove that, it takes 1 hour there too. So unfortunately, it's the EC2 client file specifically that when you compile it requires like 4.5 gigabyte of RAM, and that's, I think that that's the main killer, because if you open it, it's a ton of includes.
Yeah.
So one of the things beyond using Ninja, which definitely shortened the build time, we have to understand if there's a way to cache objects like with CC cache, because I searched, but I couldn't find something that seems really production ready.
Okay.
So it's tricky, but yeah.
Sure. I mean, okay. I'm gonna but thank you very much for the info. Let me know what I can do to help.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Can we move AWS out of the source dependency layer? Like, can we basically just build it and cache it and squirrel that artifact away somewhere?
I think we could somewhere. So I know that the build is really slow on ACI because the machines there are not exactly performant. I can build, locally on my VM, it takes like 20 minutes to build everything while also running clang tidy, sleepy check, and all the repository stuff like cloning things and submodules. So,
but I mean, it seems so we could do things to sort of do object level caching, and maybe that's fine. But it feels like this is probably not a thing where we're actually changing the build arguments very often. So this feels like something that we should just pull out of something we've pre-built somewhere. Like I don't understand that part of the tool chain super well.
Yeah, I think we went away from it because we didn't really like the experience with Linux Brew. And another issue here is that since we ended up rewriting all the libraries ourselves in CMake, we would also have to rewrite all the install steps that are currently not there.
I guess I'm not advocating we ditch all of that and go back to the homebrew style approach. I thought that you sort of built a set of layered dependency resolution things. Like, can we create a layer to hold the AWS SDK?
Yeah, we can. I think we could update the formula layer, which is already used by OpenSSL, so that we could build it if the binary is not present somewhere, which could be either locally or via a link outside on an S3 bucket or something like that.
Does that make more sense than trying to move to Ninja or to sort of find a CC cache equivalent?
Well, CC cache would be like a really nice to have. Ninja, I think it is a must-have.
Yeah.
On a decent machine, building Osquery will not take too long. And the only issue we have here is that MS build is a terrible build system and doesn't parallelize things quite as well compared to any other build system out there, like Xcode, make pretty much anything. So I think Ninja is a worthy milestone here.
Yeah, I can also add that MS Build has the problem of long paths, which is also it creates deep hierarchies and then has the limit of long paths. So it actually supports only 256 characters. So yay. While Ninja actually doesn't have this issue. So that's another reason to switch.
It compiles fine on Windows right now. Though some of the tests, Stefan knows more about it, do not pass correctly. So it is a matter of building it again and see what's wrong with it.
Yeah, there might be some default flags that MS Build adds and Ninja doesn't, or yeah.
Well, if anyone actually does the work to get Ninja in, I'd certainly read that PR. The internet finds me something like CC cache, so there may be an option there too. I don't understand CMake well enough to do anything with these, so but I'm generally happy to read PRs.
We could open an issue for this and also maybe explain how to use Ninja. It is really easy, but maybe it is worth to track this in an issue.
Do you want an issue for Ninja and an issue for CC cache?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'll make them.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're at 2. There were a couple of other things we can bring up, but I don't know how much of them. I guess people probably want to hear it. So a little while ago, we set up the donation ability through Community Bridge. I donated money to Osquery and it worked, as did Alessandro. So Osquery has at least tens of dollars in its name now.
Nice.
Mostly though, I did this to actually test that the donation flow will work. I don't think we've wholly figured out how to spend it yet, but
I'm sure you can find a way.
Where's the
more CI machines?
So that exists. There were some issues around international credit cards as well, and I've reached out to the Community Bridge PM for funding, and we'll see if they say anything. There's been a little bit of movement on getting us an Apple Dev account. So far, this is mostly just email with Michael Dolan at the Linux Foundation around basically organizational status for Osquery, and like what our Apple requires organizational statuses to sign things. So I owe him some more email, and I think we'll make slow progress on that. I'm skimming over the list of stuff. I think that's kind of most of the stuff. Someone asked me to talk about notarization, which I'm kind of happy to do to anyone who wants to listen to it, either officially in office hours or afterwards. Up to y'all. Does anyone else have other things? Anyone want to bring up anything?
Oh, please talk about it. It's really interesting and also useful for everyone here, especially me.
Going.
Or do you want to save it for next time, or?
I'm happy to stay out here and talk about notarization anytime people want to listen.
It's true, and it's recorded, so they can come back, the people who aren't here. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, so these are my own thoughts and kind of what I've empirically observed and what I understand. This is not anything resembling an official Apple answer, right? So Apple has generally been really concerned with user safety, and that's led them down these paths of sandboxing application environments. We see this in iOS, and we're starting to see it in Catalina. Stronger and stronger code signing requirements. These things also around, like, to code sign, you either have to be a named individual or a named organization. So they're really trying to tie strong audit trails. One of the things that was introduced somewhere mid-Mojave and has now become required inside Catalina is a process called notarization. So notarization is implemented by Gatekeeper. So Gatekeeper is like, I don't know, it's like a daemon that sits in a Mac OS, and it basically intercepts calls, and it checks things like code signing and notarization status for basically anything you're trying to execute. And if you don't hit those, it will sort of stop execution. And usually give the user some relatively scary looking warning. This was a thing that existed inside Mojave, and it strengthened in Catalina. So if you ever see dialog boxes that look like Apple can't verify the identity of blah, 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 that's Gatekeeper popping up. And the one that you'll see for a notarization failure is under Catalina, looks something along the lines of, Apple cannot verify that this doesn't have malware in it. Cancel. This is your only option. You can whitelist particular things. The process is a little cumbersome. We can loop back to that in a minute. Notarization itself is interesting. So code signing, the thing that exists on Windows and has always existed on Mac OS, right? You take a certificate, you sign the binary, you embed some bits, and you ship it, right? It's totally kind of offline process. Gatekeeper is an inherently online process because the way, as a developer, what I do is I take my thing and I upload it to Apple, and Apple scans it and does whatever they decide and passes judgment on it. Then users execute that thing, and Gatekeeper on the user system looks at the checksum of the thing running, talks to Apple servers, and then decides whether or not to run. So it's actually looping through Apple servers to pass or fail it. There's sort of some important caveats here, right? Which is that to work in an offline environment, you can staple the notarization pass to the output file, right? So if you imagine you had an app, you take your app, you upload it to Apple, Apple goes, this is cool, thumbs up. You can then download that, they call it a ticket, and staple it onto the application. So then there's an offline Gatekeeper authorization. What this means for Osquery is that we should start notarizing our releases, and this is an asynchronous process. Secretly, I notarized them all already, so that's okay. But at some point, when we overhaul our code sign flow, we should probably loop in a notarization check. These are all these interesting things here, right? Because the notarization is effectively of a binary, of the checksums on that binary, anyone can notarize it. So when I actually notarize the Collide installation packages, because those include Osquery, Osquery gets notarized as well. So it's sort of this little bit of an end run. There's a lot of stuff written on the internet right now about notarization, and it's all super complicated. I threw some notes into issue 5894. There's basically 3 commands. It's kind of all you really need to know. Yeah, I don't know. Questions about that brain dump?
Yeah, I do. I was wondering, is an application automatically notarized if you code sign it?
No.
No.
Nope.
So they do not overlap, right? So what's the difference between the two? I mean,
Well,
once you code sign...
So code signing is basically, right? It's like Windows. You take the checksum, you take your cert, you say, digital signature, done. Under Apple, you also sort of sign some additional options. So, and you might have timestamps, right? The options are just things like use the hardened runtime. That's the primary option. Notarization is actually uploads it to Apple servers, and they run some kind of offline analysis of it. So it's a totally different process. I mean, I think under the hood, it's all digital signatures, but
isn't it like when they review apps for the App Store, basically? But
Yeah.
this is like an offline thing.
Yes and no. I believe the App Store review has humans that are making editorial decisions.
Yeah.
Notarization, I think, is wholly automated. I've generally found uploading to notarization takes between 2 and 30 minutes, and then it takes about 1 to 30 minutes before I get back a pass-fail. If you fail it enough, they'll tell you why. Like, they will tell you why you failed a notarization check. And usually, it's things like, hey, sign that first, or sign that using the hardened runtime, and things like that. And Charvel, looks like you're trying to say something too.
Yeah, I haven't really made much headway. Like, I didn't try it with Osquery, but I've tried like a couple of other binaries that I have, and it's relatively simple. I just don't know if we'll have to integrate it into our release CI, or I know Teddy signs macOS packages, so I'm sure he's the one who's gonna do it forward, Michael. Not sure yet.
No, forward it'll get done by one of us or CI. We haven't, until we get an Apple dev account in Osquery's name, we haven't really wanted to pick that rock up. But I think the general plan is to get an Apple dev account in Osquery's name, move signing into CI, and there's sort of there's like a blueprint that we haven't written to make that go. And probably the same thing that code signs should upload to the notarization servers. Inherently, the process has to be a little bit different because it's an asynchronous process. You can't just like notarize and be done. So it's sort of like submit for notarization and then loop back in a little while and verify it's, you passed. I can tell you how I do this at Collide. Everything I do at Collide is ultimately stored in a GCP bucket. So the way it works is I have a thing that just runs through and it finds everything that hasn't been submitted for notarization and submits it. And everything that has been submitted, it updates the status, which is just a metadata attribute on the thing. I don't really know what will make sense for Osquery yet. Asynchronous processes are always a little weird. I suspect this is not going to be I don't think this is going to be a super big deal to us as a project. Osquery seems pretty easy to get notarized right now. No doubt we'll have to write some more bits of CI to submit it, and we probably will need to cut over to using the hardened runtime, which probably won't matter, but it's a thing that I don't know if anyone's tested yet.
As long as you use public APIs, I think it should be okay.
I remember the last QueryCon, we had a talk about how to reverse the runtime to use private API.
It's only using Python extensions.
Yeah.
I think,
wondering, do we have an ETA for this? Is this going to be enforced in a more hard way in the future?
I've got 2 answers for that. One answer is it is enforced in Catalina.
Yeah, I did notice, but I was able to bypass it with a couple of clicks.
You can. So the way Gatekeeper, so the way Apple's implemented this, which is pretty weird. Gatekeeper only applies to things you have downloaded from the internet. And that is set by an extended attribute in the file system, the Apple quarantine bit. So Gatekeeper checks. Sorry, are you asking something, Alex?
I said, oh, so we can ship it on floppy disks.
I think actually, I don't remember if that would, not that Apple ships floppies, but I don't know if you like stuck a CD in, if that would basically get a quarantine bit on it or not. There's a lot of weird logic around what things get quarantine bits and how you remove them. Like from the terminal window, you can always just remove a quarantine bit. And a lot of the update frameworks for OS X strip quarantine bits off, right? Like if you use like wget or curl, you don't get quarantine bits. Quarantine bits are primarily set by Safari, Chrome, and Firefox, and the Finder.
And Bluetooth also.
Sorry, and what?
AirDrop and Bluetooth and email attachments also get that extended attribute set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like in your own testing, you can always just strip off the extended attribute and bypass this. But that isn't really a good answer for end users. So my hope is that Apple will actually start enforcing Gatekeeper more broadly. Like this whole quarantine bit thing seems very weird from a security perspective. Sort of like this weird opt-in thing where they're trying to like patch the OS to always thing it, but I don't know, it feels like whack-a-mole.
Looks similar to what we have on Windows, in theory.
Is it? Everything in Windows is supposed to be code signed.
Yeah, but some stuff is marked with an attribute, and when you right-click on it and go to the properties, you can unblock applications to run them.
Interesting.
So if we have a minor release, let's say, we have to submit it to Apple for review, right? How long do you think that takes?
My experience is it's under an hour.
That's pretty fast.
Okay, I would think like a week. But
We might have a longer time for the first approval.
I haven't found that.
Well, we have an iOS app that's been an extended approval because...
App Store, though. That's probably an App Store process.
I see. So it's different?
Yeah, notarization is an entirely automated set of checks that run against binaries, as opposed to App Store submissions, which are really more of like an editorial check by humans.
Yeah.
I've seen the notarization pipelines be a little slow, and over in Mac admin Slack, people talk about that. But when they're talking about slow, it's taking 15 minutes to submit this, and not, I've been waiting 2 days. So I have never seen notarization take more than, say, an hour. It's been super fast. It's all automated. This isn't to say it won't change, but
well, that's good for now. Yeah.
As presented and as described by Apple, it's fundamentally a set of automated checks against: does your app use public APIs? Is your app code signed? Is your app using the hardened runtime? There's probably 5 other ones I don't remember, but they're that level of check, and not humans being like, do we think that this like allows children to swear or something?
Yeah. So are we at the end of our agenda today?
I think that's everything. People, we missed an item. Haha.
Kill switch.
Kill switch. Teddy asks if anyone uses the kill switches.
It seems like no one used it. It was a really interesting concept. So I wonder if they have internally moved to a different implementation.
You can read the PR. I think their conclusion was this was the wrong way to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I read about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what the right way was.
Yeah.
I think they just mentioned file system flags.
Yeah, but what do they mean with that?
Well, you might like touch a flag on the file system, right? /etc/osquery/disable x/etsy/osquery/enable y. Like I don't know for sure what they're doing, but
yeah.
I think maybe an interesting question here is, how do we decide something is deprecated to remove? who do we want to like hear from on that?
Well, I think a really nice thing here is that if we remove something that people use, like the CLI flag change that has been recently merged, there are many people scrutinizing the pull request, which is good. So I think we can open a blueprint and then go ahead with it and be reasonably sure that people will look at it sooner or later.
And we probably should put
That's great.
a log message out for things that we plan to remove.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question of, I think if we were going to follow a proper deprecation flow, we should absolutely go through that. And I think we've done that for some of the command line flags. For something like kill switch, I don't know, like if we don't think anyone's using it, I kind of just want to yank it out. It's a lot of code.
Yeah, I think no one is using it because I think it was introduced like in 3.3.2 or 3.3, right when everything, basically master was frozen. So unless it was used in the experimental refactor, which is not the case, I don't see how people could start relying on it. Especially since it is not exported to extensions, as far as I know. It is just some kind of core functionality.
I'm going to tag Nishant, Jason, and Alex, because like the three of you kind of represent a handful of vendors. And anyone else who wants a tag on this? Trail of Bits, you want one?
I know that we do not use it, so we don't
Great,
really...
I'm going to tag you and then you can say that.
All right.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just feel like it's a, if we're going to kill a feature, we may as well tag, get obvious buy-in from people.
Yeah. I mean, we are using the upstream project for everything. So we don't have any private fork.
Okay, well, I tagged some people in this. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use it. I've only seen people ask questions about it and be slightly confused. Okay, anyone else?
I think that is all. We only have a couple of action items. So you mentioned you're going to open issues for Ninja and CCCache on Windows.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if it is worth opening an issue to go ahead and try out the hardened runtime on macOS, if it is a requirement for a good notarization process.
To give you a more accurate answer, it is a requirement for notarization as of January 2020.
I see.
So, I'm sorry, I'm confused. So the hardened runtime, I thought that was only required if you were submitting it for App Store.
No, it was originally a notarization requirement as well. Apple announced that they delayed that one a little bit, so that one will kick in January of 2020.
Okay, that's good to know.
Unless it changed again, but like that was my recollection of how that worked.
Where's that donate link you mentioned earlier?
Funding.communitybridge.org, and you can search for Osquery.
Do we want to put that on the osquery.io or anything like that?
Oh, it's a brilliant idea. I'll make a ticket. Because I'm not going to make a PR. No, there's a nicer looking URL now.
Yeah, not really. But...
That one.
Oh, yeah. Way better.
Okay.
Yeah, that site is confusing. I can never navigate it correctly.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay. If no one else has anything, I'll say we should probably call it done.
Yeah. Thanks so much for wrapping us out with notarization. I had no idea what it was.
Sure.
Good to have an expert here on macOS stuff.
I'm always happy to yammer about that. I think I really need to start the way we're doing code signing and update that shell script too. But okay, thank you all for coming out and being here.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.